light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show I have my friend David Slater, who is a spiritual counselor and intuitive. And the topic we came up with to discuss today is skepticism as a path, I guess, if you will, to an authentic spiritual practice, or skepticism as a path to genuine faith. It seems skepticism and faith have often been portrayed as being adversaries and opposites, when in fact I would find them more complementary. In order to trust anything, I think it has to be accountable. Without accountability, trust should not be present. Without trust, accountability makes no sense. The two function really together. Skepticism is the accountability that's holding the line for faith. You know, to distinguish between the faith that is genuine and solid, to distinguish that from the faith that really shouldn't be trusted because it's not open to questioning or skeptical conjecture.
I heard a stand-up comic one time say, when two people argue about religion, they're trying to prove who has a better imaginary friend. And wouldn't that be wonderful if we all took that idea of, if you're talking about facts and figures, if you're talking about dates of when World War II started or ended, there is a correct answer. Mm-hmm. It's verifiable. It's something that's solid. When you start speaking of a belief, when you start speaking of the ethereal, mm-hmm. there is no empirical evidence. And whether something exists or doesn't exist, if you can allow yourself to be wrong, because how many of us still believe what we believed when we were 18? Okay. And it is constantly changing.
But I still find myself stumbling over the reference to imaginary friend.
When you speak of God, when you speak of spirit, mm-hmm. And again,
to me it's absolutely real.
Yes.
But when we say imaginary friend, the interpretation seems to be that it's something that is not real.
But my thought in the process is to not take yourself seriously. Because you and I can discuss things very easily, but your belief structure is not my belief structure.
Okay.
Your concept of God is not my concept of God. And
nor would I expect that any two persons' concepts of God are the same.
And that's the wonderful thing. To be skeptic, to doubt to your own beliefs. Mm-hmm. Being skeptic of somebody else's beliefs is ridiculous. Just like you said, it won't be the same. I can't be skeptic of your beliefs because they're yours and they matter only to you. But if I question the existence of God, doing a reading for someone, and I speak of these are possibilities. If it's something in the future, it's a possibility. Mm-hmm. If I'm speaking with someone who's passed or whatever, if I get enough right, great. As far as facts and figures, the hope is that you can allow things to be wrong. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
About a year ago, I gave someone a reading, and they didn't like it one bit. Mm-hmm. So they changed everything that would affect those things in their life, and none of it happened. Is that a right reading or a wrong reading? Was I full of beans, or did I give them the most profound message they needed?
Well, except that by their actions they testified that they believed the reading.
Yes.
If they didn't believe it, they wouldn't have acted in contradiction to it.
And what was the end result? And did Spirit send those words through me so that they would make the changes, or that they would believe, or that it would happen? My point being, I'll have, again, folks walk into the room and they're limping. And I'll make some reference to their leg not feeling well. I'm like, how did you know? You must be so amazing. No, you limped in. Or in a previous conversation, they said something, they forgot that they told me this, and I'll repeat it, and they're like, oh, you're so amazing. I'm like, no, you told me 2 days ago this very fact. And to allow it. And also, when you're discussing things that are uncomfortable with someone, being very to the point, I like to tell people sometimes I'm full of beans. Sometimes I'm completely wrong. And if they can accept that, then it gives the possibilities back over to them. When somebody says, oh, this, and this will happen in your future, you can go into a total panic. And you start wondering, what happened to free choice? Well, nothing happened to free choice.
Or you can embrace it with skepticism and place each prediction on trial to see whether or not, and for what reasons, it turns out the way it does.
So throwing the skepticism in any one thing, will we, when we die, experience the God we believed in when we lived?
I guess we'll know when we get there, but I don't know if there's any way to know the answer to that question.
There's where the skepticism comes in. That helps. When you can say, wow, been a Catholic all my life and I may meet a Jewish God. And
well, or none of the above.
Right.
I mean, I have a hard time believing that the actual description of the divine in any way resembles the human imaginary constructions.
And again, goes back to the skepticism that helps to be able to allow for the fact that you could be wrong, or that
everyone could be wrong.
Exactly.
Or that everyone might be a little bit right, but not in the way they think.
So removing right and wrong, especially when it comes to faith, is marvelous. It
can leave you with a more genuine faith.
Yes.
Because faith is required to respond to the questions you raise, what's left is a faith that is able to withstand precisely those questions. And consequently would be a more robust faith than the faith that had not been exposed to any questions whatsoever.
And leads to new questions, which leads to a new skepticism, which leads to another strong faith. And if you don't test your own faith,
stronger faith.
Yes. But the important part is understanding it's self-skepticism.
Okay.
We are not responsible for anyone else's belief. We are being skeptical or critical of anyone else's belief. This is another concept we've played with here, is that it's a mystic experience. Even if you put it in the context of a prophetic religion, it's a mystic experience.
An encounter of the human and the divine.
Yes.
Which, if you consider the human as the finite and the divine as the infinite, anytime the two even touch for just a split second, it creates radical change. And it becomes such a miraculous, awe-inspiring moment that the finite will never be able to describe everything that it experienced in that brief touch to other members of an equally finite place. The infinite remains as infinite as ever. And yet, because it is infinite, means that it could manifest in a completely different way at another time.
And makes the ride of a faith that you have far more exciting. I had a delightful experience, and again, this was with my mentor,
Okay.
and this was shortly after. He'd asked me a question about church things that I knew,
Mm-hmm.
and I was excited, first of all, that he asked me a question I had the answer to, and I answered chapter and verse right on down the line.
Okay.
And he looked at me and says, "You're a whore." And I said, "Excuse me?" He says, "Well, we'll have the conversation again when the words are yours."
Okay. Because you were parroting somebody else's words.
They were not mine. And it was delightful. It was one of the most amazing things. And it hurt my feelings for about 10 seconds
Okay.
till he followed it up. And then immediately what he said had such truth in it. Yes, I did not answer with my own feelings, my own words, my own beliefs.
Your own truth.
My own truth. That's where the truth that doesn't require skepticism
Mm-hmm.
is the one truth we deal with every day, and that is what we feel. Whatever you feel, if you tell me I'm sad, I can't say no, you're not. What a ridiculous statement to make. Mm-hmm. The truth we deal with every day is what we feel. That's where you don't add the skepticism.
If it's genuine truth that makes us free, then it would seem that genuine skepticism is required so that no imposter for that genuine truth would be allowed to stand.
Precisely. Which gives birth to a fun concept I've played with, which is spiritual mathematics.
Okay.
Works along the same lines as emotional mathematics. If I feel this, if these are the conditions,
Mm-hmm.
then this is a result I can arrive at. Now, it doesn't work the same as 2 + 2 = 4.
Mm-hmm.
But when we start feeling things that are projections, or we start believing things that are somebody else's teaching,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't add up in the mathematics of it. It doesn't follow through because I don't believe what other people believe. Something I experienced again in my experience in the church was I was told all about what Wicca was and all the things that go on in Wicca. These are conservative Christians telling me all about Wicca. What I found out later in life, not much of that was accurate because I met Wiccans and they showed me a belief that was remarkable and amazing, and one I don't share currently 100%, but it sure wasn't what I was told. And that's where, again, with the skepticism...
Well, because the first group were the outsiders describing something toward which they had a negative bias.
Right.
They did not have the ability to describe it objectively.
Right. And had I had the courage as a young man to say, this doesn't add up spiritually, and go find a group of Wiccans and say, please teach me.
So, skepticism and accountability are essentially the two ends of the teeter-totter.
Uh-huh. When you can not take yourself seriously on most of life, let alone a belief structure or a religion or whatever, you allow for the growth of the uncontrollable.
See, and I would say exactly the opposite.
Okay.
That it's by taking ourselves seriously that we're able to appreciate the richness and the depth and the potential of something much more.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that a blind faith has sufficient skepticism to bring a holy honesty to seriously focus upon oneself, upon one's soul, upon one's process.
Of course, both will need to happen, because if you're never taking yourself seriously or always taking yourself seriously, it's lopsided. So
I would say it's okay to take yourself seriously all the time, as long as you remember that the self includes all of the inescapable absurdity of life.
we're agreeing.
Being able to look in the mirror and to take yourself seriously, to say, this really is me.
Uh-huh.
And oh my God, what I'm seeing is someone who is clumsy, awkward, who doesn't always say the right thing, who sometimes says completely the wrong thing, who misses social cues, who misunderstands even some of the most basic statements. I have a wonderful book I purchased a number of years ago called How High Can You Bounce? And the subtitle, I think, is all about turning your setbacks into comebacks. The author, though, has a physical birth defect in which he essentially, I guess the closest description is to say that it's like he has a hand with two thumbs and some improperly formed fingers or something. I mean, it's a very awkward sort of thing that doesn't work like a usual hand. It's just a birth defect that he has. Well, he cites in there an incident where his wife got up to introduce him to an audience. And thinking in terms of his birth defect, she stepped to the microphone and just said, I want you to know I have the most well-equipped husband anyone could want. And there was this tense silence where she suddenly realized what she had said and all the different ways that it could be interpreted. And instead of being horribly embarrassed for having made a potentially vulgar statement, she busted out laughing at herself for having blundered into the most horrendous double entendre anybody would not have thought of doing.
Uh-huh.
And the minute she laughed at her own absurdity, taking herself seriously, I mean, she was looking at it in all seriousness. She said a double entendre that was potentially extremely vulgar. But the moment she laughed at the double entendre that had slipped out, the whole audience laughed with her.
Mm-hmm.
And it broke the tension, and everybody had a fantastic time from that point on. But it was accepting her absurdity without placing her on a pedestal that, as the wife of the guest speaker, she was supposed to be above all of that somehow. Right. Or she was supposed to be somehow eloquent and perfect and graceful. And it reminded me of a speech I heard given by the woman who was Miss America 1968 once, who was, I don't remember her name now, but she was somewhere in the South making this entrance between these little boys dressed up as Confederate soldiers with crossed swords and everything. And she said, I got to the bottom of the stairs and I tripped on the edge of my skirt. And tumbled down the last few stairs, landed in a heap at the bottom, sat up and started laughing, because they were trying to make this very, very pompous and perfect looking, grand, royal looking, regal entrance into this space. And she had just done a pratfall, basically, tripping on her own skirt, falling in a heap, being totally awkward, anything but perfect, anything but graceful. And the juxtaposition of there she is, Miss America, and this woman tripping on her skirt was so ridiculous that she took the opportunity and became the first one to laugh at just how absurd the juxtaposition was. That, to me, is taking yourself seriously, but taking yourself holistically seriously.
Yes.
And in that, in the same sort of thing as same sort of idea, same sort of stream as our topic, to understand that skepticism may be the wings that gives you a faith more substantial, more solid, more enduring than the wackiness of the world around us?
Well, a faith is so nebulous, so imprecise that...
Well, because it's not physical, of course it has to be.
Right.
It's like saying, what's the shape of a cloud?
Right. And that's where we were, again, speaking about this just a little bit ago, about the word perfection. It is probably the most subjective word in the English language.
And to some extent, the most ridiculous word.
Yes. So if perfection in its idea is that it's established by the speaker of what perfection is, what isn't perfect? Let me give a little bit of an analogy I've done with a few folks.
All you have to do to make it perfect is say, I meant to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Or another thing is if you picture a rock, and I'll do this again with clients, I'll say, get a picture of a rock in your head. And they will, and I'll say, is it perfectly square? No. Is it perfectly round? No. Is it perfectly smooth? And go down the list. And of course it isn't. And then I'll say, but does it contain everything it needs to be a rock?
Everything it needs in order to be a rock.
Rock to be defined as a rock. Yes. Well, then it's a perfect rock.
Because it doesn't have any shortcomings about being a rock.
Exactly. And it contains everything that's needed. What does a human being need to be a human being?
It depends on how you define the word human.
And that's where it gets very interesting. It's a very sloppy concept. So are we a perfect human being? Well, we contain everything we need to be defined as a human being. I don't know how more perfect you can get.
Well, I think part of it is recognizing that there is no single definition. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. He based the definition of humanity on the presence of rational thought. I loved in the movie Star Trek Nemesis, where Captain Jean-Luc Picard is talking with Data about what it is that makes us human, and within that movie, the conclusion to which he comes, or at which he arrives, is that what makes us most fully human, most fully alive, is our aspirations, that we aspire to be better than we are, that we aspire to grow, that we aspire to learn, that, in Data's case, that he aspires to exceed his programming.
Mm-hmm.
That it's our aspirations and our dreams and our reaching beyond ourselves that most validates the truth and beauty of our soul.
Mm-hmm. And we can...
what is better, more able to do that than skepticism?
Uh-huh.
Without skepticism, we wouldn't be asking enough questions to figure out what's beyond.
Yes. And we can achieve to be different than we are, or better, and it lasts for as long as it does, and it is a true experience. And
when that experience ends, we can go find another one.
Another different to
achieve. Now there's something to be skeptical about until we find even more gold within it.
Uh-huh.
Any final thoughts as we wind up our subject for this show?
When you were talking about the gold, just one thing that has helped me so much is Mike and the Mechanics had a album titled Beggar on a Beach of Gold.
Okay.
We will put out our tin cup forgetting that we're sitting on a beach of gold when we are being human and allowing ourselves to be human. We have everything we need.
Just have to learn to utilize it a little better. And skepticism can help us do that.
Or acknowledge it, yes. Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for watching.